Genesis chapter 21. Genesis chapter 21 tells the story of the birth of Isaac, the long-awaited son of Abraham and Sarah. In verse 1, we see that the Lord visited Sarah as he had promised, and she conceived and bore a son to Abraham in his old age. This was a miraculous event since both Abraham and Sarah were well advanced in years and previously thought to be unable to have children. Abraham named his son Isaac, as instructed by God in verse 3. The name Isaac means laughter and reflects the joy and laughter that Sarah expressed when she learned of her pregnancy earlier in Genesis. In verse 4, we see that Abraham circumcised Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him in Genesis chapter 17. This act symbolized Isaac entering into a covenant relationship with God, just like his father Abraham and generations to come. As Isaac grew, Sarah observed Ishmael, the son born to her through her maidservant Hagar, mocking her son Isaac in verse 9. This troubled Sarah, so she requested Abraham to send Hagar and Ishmael away. Though Abraham was distressed, God reassured him in verse 13 that he would bless Ishmael and make a great nation of him. Abraham, obedient to God's direction, provided Hagar and Ishmael with some supplies and sent them away. God reaffirmed his promise to Abraham, stating that Isaac would be the one through whom the covenant blessings would flow in verse 12. In verse 22, Abimelech, the king of Gerar, and Phicol, his commander, approach Abraham, recognizing that God was with him in everything he did. They sought a sworn agreement with Abraham to show kindness and honesty towards one another. Abraham agreed to the request and, in an act of hospitality, provided 7 ewe lambs to Abimelech as evidence of his ownership of a well in Beersheba, which was a sign of peace between them, verse 31. Finally, in verse 33, we see that Abraham planted a tamarisk tree and called upon the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. This act of worship and thanksgiving demonstrates Abraham's continued faith and devotion to God. This chapter teaches us several important lessons. It reveals God's faithfulness in fulfilling his promises, even when the circumstances seem impossible. It also highlights the consequences of doubting God's plan, as seen in the conflict between Ishmael and Isaac. Additionally, it emphasizes the importance of maintaining peace and acting with honesty in our relationships.